podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by thebatmanuniverse.net. Here, we love talking about everything Batman. The BatmanUniverse.net has news, original content, and reviews about Batman comics, movies, TV shows, video games, and more. Check out the BatmanUniverse.net and join our Discord server to start chatting with fellow fans. We can't wait to talk to you guys. Also, visit our Patreon page and join our other awesome supporters. But enough of this nonsense. On with the show.
Hey, Bat fans. This week we're going to party like it's 1989. In honor of Batman's 35th anniversary this year, which was officially on June 23rd, we're going to take a look back at the film, its history, and how it changed superhero films forever. You want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts. But first, we have a couple of news items to cover. Our first one is The Penguin. We just got a new trailer drop, came out within the last few days. And along with seeing a little bit more scenes of what's going on in the show, what it looks like, it leads us to believe that, this show takes place a week after the events of the Batman, with Alberto Falcone and Sofia Falcone scrambling to pull their empire together. Meanwhile, Penguin's vying for control, and it seems like he's making some kind of deal with Salvatore Maroni. All those things are going on, but at the end of the trailer, we get a window of when this is going to come out. We don't have a specific date, but it tells us that the release window is this September, which is great news. BJ, before we move on, do you have any thoughts on this or anything that's different that stood out to you when you watched the trailer?
Nothing really different than from that first teaser trailer we got, but I still like the vibe. It's very like Sopranos-esque, like Law and Order mob show, so I'm very into that. September sounds great. I know it's kind of gonna we have something coming in August first, so August, September, it's gonna be a fun month to be a Batman fan.
Yeah, it's gonna be all Batman all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I figured I wouldn't spend too much time on this because I feel like we're probably the same page we were last time the last trailer came out. But speaking of August, we got a trailer for Batman Caped Crusader, which comes out on Prime on August 1st. Early impressions, it's very 1940s noir inspired. Feels like Batman the Animated Series, but more in, I would say, the early days of Batman. And we got more of the cast. There was a teaser trailer that showed the cast too, as well. So 2 trailers if you want to actually get technical about it. But Batman's voiced by Hamish Linklater, who, if you've watched Midnight Mass, he was the priest in that. He's also done other work, but Harvey Dent Two-Face is voiced by Diedrich Bader, who voiced Batman in Batman Brave and the Bold. Selena Kyle Catwoman is voiced by Christina Ricci. Harley Quinn is voiced by Jamie Chung. And there are many other famous voices whom we don't really know who's voicing what necessarily yet, but those voices include Minnie Driver, John DiMaggio of Futurama Bender fame. And he also voiced Joker in Under the Red Hood, and then Tom Kenny and more. I'm assuming you watched the trailer, BJ. How did you feel?
Loved it. Loved the trailer. I actually wrote 5 things about it, so maybe I won't spoil so much about it so people can go read it, but I love the vibe. 1940s style, very old school Batman, big ears Batman, as I call that one. We get a new version, like a new old version of Alfred that we haven't seen since super early days comics. It's really stacked cast. Those are some pretty big names that I don't think we were all expecting. I think we were expecting like some of like the usual voice actors we get, like John DiMaggio. I feel like he's in every like animated property ever. So yeah, I'm pretty pumped for it. August 1st, so we're a month away.
And one of the things I imagine we'll probably cover it on the podcast after it comes out, because we're probably both going to watch it right away. But one of the things I really liked that I wanted to hit on is there's this scene where Batman's doing detective work in the trailer, and he's in the cave, and he's with that Alfred design, who's a much bigger, portlier Alfred.
Yeah.
But he has a board with like writing and stuff all over. Like he's connecting the clues like in a really old school fashion. Like there's a computer back there, and we see like things in the cave, but the fact that like he's doing like detective work, like the old timey, classic way is really kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, I actually put that like in the five things. Like it's very low tech. Like I feel like the only like the biggest like technology that this world has seen is the Batmobile. And like one point they call it like he's riding around in that hot rod of his. Like it's really like this old school like terminology that it was really cool.
And we will have a link to your five things below. I haven't got a chance to edit yet as of this recording, but that will be on my docket the next day or so.
Perfect.
Because along with that, we have our big 89 discussion, and I have spent over a month on this article that will also be linked to below about analyzing the opening sequence to Batman 1989, and I put together a shot list that's full of 67 shots in that opening 4.5 minutes.
Damn.
So it took a long time to put together, but you can download the shot list if you so choose. It's not necessarily crammed inside of the essay. There's just a link if you want to see it, so you can see the homework with my essay, but kind of picked apart that opening and talked about the mood and the themes and kind of how it sets up the rest of the film. But that's all to say the rest of this episode is all 89 all the time. And we're a little delayed. It was a couple weeks ago that the 35th anniversary happened, but better late than never. And to jump right in, it's no surprise that, Batman movies are popular, but at one point in time, post the 60s show, Batman was considered a toxic product. Nobody wanted it. Steer clear. In fact, it was cheap enough to buy the film rights to Batman that Michael Uslan, then a comic book fan, author, and collegiate professor, was able to scoop up the film rights in 1979. Which is kind of weird. Can you imagine that? Like, it's 1979 and you could just save your money from, your job and, other things you got going on and just buy the film rights to Batman because nobody cared.
Pretty crazy. What a different time.
You can read about it in his autobiography, the first one he wrote called The Boy Who Loved Batman, which is being made into a Broadway production. We also interviewed him briefly on this podcast a couple of years back, which there will be a link to that below. But what followed was this 10-year odyssey from 1979 to 1989, as Uslan and his partner / mentor Benjamin Melnicker, who was also a big shot producer in Hollywood, really well known, fought to get a dark and serious Batman movie made that was much closer to the Bob Kane and Bill Finger vision of the character. And what resulted, obviously, is the film that everybody knows now that just had its 35th anniversary, and people still kind of watch pretty regularly. And when this movie came out, Batmania, which was a term for, the initial response to the 60s show, came back in full swing. And you could argue that 89's success kind of changed movies forever. There was this mad dash of wannabe Batman-like superhero films that came out after, riding on the coattails. And so you saw things like The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty, Rocketeer, The Shadow, and others. That's just a handful. Many of those films I actually enjoy, but, they all tried to ride that Batman wave. But kind of to get back to the core film, BJ, when did you first see Batman, and was it an impactful movie for you?
Definitely a big impact on my Batman fandom. I probably saw it. I obviously didn't see it in theaters, but I probably saw it. I mean, I could still picture that VHS like copy that cover would just like it's a famous movie poster with just the gold Batman and the logo. I probably wore that tape out. That was probably the biggest, like that and like Ninja Turtles, like the two VHS tapes I was going back and forth in like the early 90s. I'm sure like my story is similar to like a lot of people. But yeah, that's probably of those first four, that's probably the one I go back to a lot, as much as I like enjoy Forever. But yeah, Batman 89, that's the sweet stuff right there.
So when you watch it lately, you say you go back to a lot, does it evoke sort of the same feelings? Do you have different feelings about it now that it's been like 35 years later?
Maybe So probably when like the height of the Dark Knight, I was like 89. Like that's kid stuff compared to this. Like Jack Nicholson's good, but he's too goofy. Like I like Heath Ledger. Like he's got makeup on his face and it fades like throughout the movie. But now I'm like a smarter fan, I guess, not to sound like pretentious or anything, but like, uh, uh yeah, 89. Like it does take you back to does take me back to like that kid who would always put on 89, especially when the Flash was coming out. I was going back to all those movies and doing a big rewatch, especially 89 and Returns. But 89 is much more enjoyable than Returns, as much as I like Returns.
Yeah, I still love it. I still have all the same feels about it. The one thing I think I noticed as an adult more so than anything else is the world building in 89. Because like when you think about it, there's a lot of scenes where there's just like kind of building this world, like just Harvey Dent running for like district attorney, and you got all this stuff going on with the mayor and like the crime and like that relationship, there where Bruce Wayne doesn't show up to events where there's clearly a placard with his name on it and an empty seat there, and just like outside of this whole like Batman and the Joker battle, there's like a you could see there's an attempt to build a Gotham that has a lot of moving parts and characters that like comic fans would know and understand, and that would
Yeah, as I
later become something.
yeah, like throughout the movie, like you kind of don't see this right away, but throughout the movie, there's this big 100-year celebration of Gotham that you really kind of it's just in the background and you really don't notice it at all. Even though like the final battle does take place at this 100-year celebration, but until you really have to like look for it to notice it because everything else is so grand and big.
Yeah, and you know, why do you think it holds up for you still? Is it just like the nostalgia, or is it something else?
Probably partially nostalgia. It's just that first one that I've seen. It's the first one that I remember. Is the It was cool. Like I had all the action figures. Those was it Kenner or Toy Biz or who had the action figure
I
line?
think it was Kenner.
Yeah, that sounds
I
about
could be
right.
wrong though.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go
Like
that.
it's the first time that I've seen like an all black Batman suit, which is cool which was, I mean, it was pretty badass. It's still kind of badass now. I like that first suit better than the return suit because it's more grittier, even though it's got the sculpted abs. Like it kind of makes no sense, but it's pretty cool. It's just, I don't know. Jack Nicholson's obviously fantastic in it. Like he kind of is chewing up the scenery and kind of, you can tell Burton was just like, do whatever you want, just act as crazy as possible. And Jack was like, hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we'll get more into that later.
Yes.
Actually, I did want to clarify. I did look it up real fast. So Kenner did Batman and DC related toys up until 1986.
Mm.
It was Toy Biz that did the 89 tie-in toys. So, I mean, you were guessing right. You're hitting both companies that touched the property around then in the late 80s, but
they were smart enough to make a Bob the Goon action figure, so you got to give them props for that.
I know McFarlane, they made their Batman and Robin toys and they got their Batman Forever ones coming out that look pretty good too, and I may have to scoop those up, but I really want them to circle back to those early ones, and if they do an 89, make a Bob the Goon, or maybe make a Lawrence too, because I feel like I need a bald guy with a boombox.
And a boombox. I mean, don't we all? Don't we all?
Have you had the opportunity to see it in theaters since? I know you didn't get to see it back then, but
I haven't. Every time they've had those Fathom events or re-releases, like I'm just busy and I can't make it. It crushes me every time, but one day I will. One day I will.
If it makes you feel better, they redid the sound effects and they recolored it a little bit in the most recent releases. So like some of the coloring's a little like darker, more of a blue scale thing going on. And some of the sound effects for people who've watched it a million times, some of the punches and this and that, like they're a little different. The sound mixing is a little more like surround sound. And so I guess it wouldn't be noticeable if you didn't watch it a lot, but if you watch it a lot, it's just like, hey, that punch sounded wrong,
Yeah, I don't think I would. Yeah, I'd be pointing at the theater like the captain means.
But speaking of sound, I wanted to get into the soundtrack a little bit. So, obviously the Batman theme by Danny Elfman is almost as iconic, if not maybe even more so than the Superman theme created by John Williams. I mean, they're both up there. I guess it's not worth it to compare, and it's like super recognizable. Everybody knows the Batman theme, and there's kind of a lot going on there. There's like a heroic, undercurrent and like some macabre overtones and things that people very much associate with Elfman and his music in years since, because man loves a xylophone. But per Elfman, he visited the set a lot throughout production to like make the music and get like a vibe and feel for the movie. And he's told a lot of stories about how he came up with the theme, but in one of the ones he likes to tell a lot, he noted that he heard the song that came to him on his flight home and that he didn't have his keyboard or anything. So he kept running into the plane bathroom to record some notes on like a little recorder so as not to bother the person sitting next to him on the flight. And that Tim Burton liked the theme, but the other producer of the film, John Peters, didn't care for it that much, needed a little convincing. So they tweaked it a few times to the tone to kind of brighten up the theme that Elfman came up with, and that's what gave us the Batman music we know and love. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and the idea of Danny Elfman running to the bathroom back and forth multiple times on the flight just to try to like write this thing down, it's kind of funny to me.
John Peters, what a legend. He always so his name always pops up in these stories.
Yeah, he does.
And then Kevin Smith for making him famous.
With that said, the Elfman Batman theme, where does that rank for you?
Number one by a long shot.
Oh, really? No, you never, you didn't usurp any other.
Nah, that theme is so great. Actually, like, obviously my wife was pregnant, couple months ago. We had our first baby, and on the birth playlist or whatever, I snuck in the '89 theme on there. So it's coming. I was kind of hoping, like, as my son was coming out, it'd be playing '89, but it didn't work out that way. But I'm happy I snuck it in there, and it kind of got the room ready back when it came on.
You got to do that stuff.
Yeah,
it's funny. Prince, on the other hand, he was a Batman fan, and he was pretty much given free reign to make music for the film, like do whatever you want. They asked for only a handful of songs, and then Prince just kind of went back to his, started making music and just came up with 9 songs, and it was way more than they asked for. But they went ahead and they took all 9 of the songs and they made a Prince-centric Batman soundtrack. And that Batman album was #1 on the Billboard charts for 6 weeks and has sold over 11 million copies since, which is pretty good. But at the time, I guess Prince's career was waning. Like, he was still popular and everything, but he didn't have the hits like he was. And so this was like a soundtrack that like put him back on the top. And I bring this up because I want to ask you how you feel about Prince's music in the film. And I also want to ask you if you're a fan of the Bat Dance, or if there are any other standout Prince tracks that you jam to.
So for the longest time, I never really realized that it was Prince songs, even though I've seen it it's in the credits, right? It says music.
Yeah.
Prince or something. So I'm too busy looking at the giant bat shape in the opening credits, but it never like clicked for me that it was Prince until obviously years later. It's kind of strange. Like we would never see that in a comic book movie, that some popular pop star or anything like that has all these songs on a soundtrack for a comic book movie. Like, I don't think we've gone. I remember Macy Gray was in like this first Raimi Spider-Man movie, but other than that, we'll never get that again, probably.
No, usually they only have one, like "Kiss from a Rose" by Seal for Batman Forever. It's like just the one, and it's just like at the end of the film.
Yeah, but I know the Batman had that the Kurt Cobain song.
Yeah.
So we'll get that, like some just dreary down and out song. Mm. But so probably one of my favorite scenes in the movie is Party Man, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's just a great scene. That's a perfect song for that scene. You mentioned Lawrence with the boombox. Lawrence boom hits that, and then they just tear apart the museum. That's one of the iconic scenes. And the end, Jack's dancing. Who Do You Trust? Is that?
Yeah.
Trust? Yeah, those are the 2 songs, obviously, that I remember the most.
If you want to hear something really kind of funny, I would recommend listening to the Lemon Crush song on the Bat. Like that one's Prince did actually end up dating Kim Basinger, who played Vicky Vale.
Savage.
But that is definitely a "I Want to Date You, Kim" kind of song there. So if anyone wants to listen to Lemon Crush and really read into those lyrics, you'll
I'll listen to that right after.
Not for the faint of heart. But
No.
I did want to note too that like throughout the movie, there's like little hints of Prince songs aside from like the obvious ones, like you just mentioned. Like the movie actually opens with a Prince song. Like once you see Gotham City and like it descends onto the streets and there's that family like trying to hail a cab, that song that's playing, I think it's just called The Future or something. And it's one of the Prince songs that's on the album. And they only play it for like, I think like 20 to 30 seconds. It's super fast and it cuts away and it's just like when the streets are busy, these people can't get a cab, and then that's it. But like it's like his music is kind of like peppered throughout there where they could fit it. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, for anyone who hasn't seen the Bat Dance music video, I would recommend watching it because it is very of its era.
It's out there. Yeah. It was very 80s.
Yeah, I should link it in this post because it is a thing to behold. It was not in the movie, but it was, definitely played a lot on MTV. But moving on to Jack Nicholson, we were going to circle back. So Jack Nicholson, obviously very iconic Joker. And when this movie was getting made, there was no doubt that the producer, Michael Uslan, that we've talked about before, really wanted Jack Nicholson as the Joker. And like the studio was kind of like, they weren't initially convinced, so he had to fight to kind of get his way. And like he famously drew Joker imagery, like the red lips over a picture of Jack Nicholson in the newspaper, and so the rest is kind of history, obviously, but the characterization of this Joker I find kind of interesting because it's definitely inspired by like older, more golden age Batman incarnations. He, he's a mobster and it's very tied with this whole mob thing. And, he's just more of a cold-blooded killer and less of the, psychopath that waxes on about order and chaos and what have you. And to get Nicholson to take the part, Tim Burton actually had to go and convince him. And he had to go like horseback riding with him apparently. And so Tim Burton had never ridden a horse before, but he took up horseback riding to go visit with Jack Nicholson. And so the way Nicholson has told this story in past interviews was that, he was personally worried about having too much of the like goofiness and brightness of the TV series Joker, played by Cesar Romero. And so he eventually realized that his involvement in this project was meant to like change the perception of the Batman film from like just a movie to like a film, like capital L or capital F film. It's this respectability, which kind of shifted the balance, which is something Robert Wuhl, who played Alexander Knox, also noted in early interviews. But there's a famous quote from Nicholson about playing the Joker, and he says something along the lines of, and I'm quoting here, "My early experience told me from working for an audience for children, the more you scare them, the more they like it. The worse you are, the better." So I guess that's how he approached his portrayal of the Joker. And questions I have, you kind of talked about how you feel about his characterization a little bit, but is there any other word beyond like iconic you would use to describe Jack Nicholson's Joker?
Any other word besides iconic? Memorable, maybe. It's just like he's so great in that he does kind of have that Cesar Romero goofy vibe, but always after he does something pretty sick and twisted. Where like I think back to after he shoots Jack Palance when he comes back and reveals himself as Joker. He shoots him, but then the music hits to a goofy music, and then he's like shooting behind his back and through his legs. That's kind of very Romero, but it's after he kind of does something sinister. And then the other scene when he's at the head, when he takes over the mob, basically he shakes the guy's hand and with the buzzer, and he's burning his face up and pretty creepy corpse style. And he's laughing throughout that, but it's always just kind of starts it sick and twisted, but ends it kind of funny, which is kind of, I'd never really put that together till like later viewings. So yeah, he's very much a combination of he's more comic book than Heath Ledger's Joker to compare. He's very much that him and Hamill kind of walk hand in hand with being funny and sinister.
Interesting, because I feel like Jack Nicholson's Joker, if we're just talking about the ones that have been in TV and movies, because obviously you can't compete with the one in the comic because he just goes on for forever, but
Yeah.
Jack Nicholson's Joker, I feel like has killed the most people. Like if you just look at how many people die in that film from being gassed at the museum, from being gassed at the end of the film, the
Yeah.
supermodels he killed, for his commercial, like obviously the Joy Buzzer and, shooting Carl Grissom and like, it's just like goes on and on and on. Like he's just killing people left and right.
Yeah, I mean those balloon. I love that whole balloon scene. Where he stole my balloons. That's a great scene. And then Bob. I mean, he kills Bob. That's his his number one guy. So that's like it's so funny. Like that scene's a great scene. Where he's like, why didn't you even tell me I did one of those things? Like it's just a great. He's so funny and good in it.
It's kind of funny. Speaking of Carl Grissom, I was reading, I didn't actually have it in my notes here, but I was reading way back when they were making the film that Jack Palance didn't like being told what to do, especially by Tim Burton, who was a young director at the time. So he kind of like barked at him and told me, just let me do what I need to do. And just, because he's one of those old timey actors. He's like, yeah, I'm just playing a mob boss, whatever. I'll come in and do my thing. But I thought that was funny. With the Joker, though, so obviously, I figured we have been spoiling this a little bit at this point, but spoiler warning for people who haven't seen a 35-year-old film. We're going to talk about that twist in the narrative. How do you feel, that in the film, Jack Napier or Joker is the gunman who killed Bruce's parents?
I get why they did it, just to kind of connect all the characters, but as like a purebred Batman fan, I don't like it. How Joker's the one that killed his parents. Or I understand why they did it. It's just the era of we got to connect all these things. But yeah, as a comic book Batman fan, I do not like it.
I mean, that's fair. I can understand that. It is kind of like a swerve.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm okay with it, I think.
I wonder how it was received back then. Like, I never see any like articles or anything. Obviously, we didn't have like Twitter or anything like that back then. But I don't know. I've never heard any like fan outrage over it.
You know what I think it is? I honestly think times have just changed and people were probably just, because I feel like there was that expectation in in the 90s where if you went to see a superhero film, they were just going to naturally change stuff and you just kind of had to deal and just accept whatever it was. And like, you just hope they didn't change too much stuff with the character because like Batman like kills people and
yeah, the villains are always going to die. Like in those early, just early comic book movies in general, the villains are always going to die. So.
Yeah. Even going to like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus died, and Green Goblin died, Harry Osborn too.
He died. Topher Grace Venom died.
Yeah.
Sandman's the only one who gets away.
Yeah, he has his little speech. Sorry, I just wanted to take care of my daughter.
All right,
just floats away.
I killed your uncle, but it was an accident.
I will say though, I love Sandman in Spider-Man 3. I love what they did to that character. They totally like did something completely different than the comics, and I like the idea that it was just like this guy and his daughter, and we're gonna make him kill Uncle Ben, but whatever.
I didn't mean to. But I forgive you. Yeah.
I'm gonna wait 2 hours to tell you though.
Yeah.
But the worst is Harry Osborn with the butler finally telling him, "Your father killed himself."
I hate that scene so much. That was like they made that scene. They wrote that scene on the day. Like that was so bad. This butler had no impact in any movies before. All of a sudden has this big secret that's gonna save the day. Oh, I hate it.
Yeah, I could have told you 2 movies ago. But I guess that's what happens when the studio and the director don't see eye to eye on certain things and they're fighting.
This is just a Spider-Man 3 podcast now. So.
I have a lot of thoughts about that movie, and they're always changing based on how I'm feeling at the time.
Same.
But I just think, going back to what you're saying though, that's just kind of how it was, it's just, you're going to get like one movie and like the villain's going to be just in the one movie and they're probably going to die. And, you're going to get like the essence of what all these years of comic books are distilled into like 2 hours. And that's just, I mean, now we have like the multiverse and like these long going narratives that never end. And like superhero movies are more like really long serials where they're just like 3 hours and you come back in a few months for the next like 3 hour chapter and, what have
Yeah,
you.
but then it was just these movies aren't really connected. Really, they'll have the same actor, but they're very rarely will they reference previous events and things like that.
And then studios are also very hesitant about being too superhero-y for the screen. So as I mentioned, The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren came out, I think, in the same year as Batman, just a few months later. And he does not wear his skull logo on his shirt. Like that's one of the biggest. It's a Dolph Lundgren with a gun wearing a black shirt.
It's just, to be honest.
And he's just shooting mobsters. You're like, okay.
Yeah.
So, and then Dick Tracy, like everybody dies in there. Like all his villains get killed. So they like, take like a whole bunch of Dick Tracy villains and they kind of throw them in a meat grinder and there's a big shootout and everybody's dead at the end.
That's another podcast for another day. That movie's like a fever dream sometimes.
Yeah. Also Danny Elfman music.
Yeah.
So, and I would argue the best Al Pacino performance.
Well.
But going back to Batman again. So Michael Keaton as Batman. Speaking of backlash, actually what you said flows right into this. So when Michael Keaton was announced as Batman, it was hated by the public. There are plenty of stories you can find on the web about this and the backlash. There were like writing campaigns. People were sending in letters, and the backlash was kind of similar to what happened. And I don't think people remember this. When Heath Ledger was announced as the Joker, that wasn't really received well until we got that first trailer. And then the same goes for Ben Affleck as Batman. It was kind of a joke for a little bit there. Everyone's like, what? I didn't think the next Batman movie would be Ben Affleck as Batman bad. But, that's kind of what happens. We think we see a little bit more of it now because of the internet. But yeah, people were so mad they're writing letters to Warner Brothers about how Michael Keaton was a comedic actor and Warner Brothers is going to ruin Batman. So, playing the role, Michael Keaton describes a lot of it as a physical performance, working the suit and just letting it do the lifting while he's more so focused, not necessarily on playing Batman, but trying to create some kind of incarnation of Bruce Wayne, which is probably why that Bruce Wayne feels different than like other movie Bruce Waynes. And a couple other notes, they know that they took inspiration from the Frank Miller approach to Bruce Wayne and that, Michael Keaton determined with Tim Burton that Bruce was, quote, so not cool and also, quote, kind of odd. Those are his words. And that, Keaton came up with this whole, that scene where he's having dinner with Vicky Vale, as Bruce Wayne and the whole can you pass the salt scene. There's a line where Bruce goes, I've never been in this room before. And I guess Keaton came up with that line and it was just part of this creating this really odd, strange kind of a, not illusory character, but just kind of just a weirdo that doesn't quite fit. And then also working the suit, there were famous, bat doubles on set that helped with certain scenes. Dave Lee was the fight choreographer who did a lot of the fighting you see in there. Carl Newman, was a dancer by trade, who did ballet, and he was hired to kind of perfect the movement of the suit because it was really notoriously hard to maneuver and make it look good. So things like jumping into the Batmobile, descending with his arms drawn, spinning and making the cape flow, things like that, where Carl Newman to make it look more like heroic and graceful. So there was kind of an art to it. We actually did an interview with him a while back, which is linked below. But all that to say, there are a lot of performances of Bruce Wayne at this point. So many actors have left their mark. How do you feel about Keaton's performance?
Keaton I would say that this movie is his best performance as Bruce Wayne Batman. He, like you said, he's odd. I've always kind of seen him as he just wants to get through the day and then get down to the cave, throw on a turtleneck, throw on his glasses, look at all his computer screens, and then throw on the suit and get to work and beat some bad guys. I love that scene. Like the first time we're introduced to him at the that gala event at Wayne Manor, where he has a pen, right? And he signs something, and then he doesn't know where to put it, and he just sticks it in some random flower. I love that part. And then Alfred's right there to grab it. Like you just get their whole relationship in like those 2 seconds of Alfred's always cleaning up this guy's mess, and Bruce really doesn't know what's going on. He just wants to. He's looking around. No one really notices him. Like Vicky Vale doesn't even know who he is. I think I love that whole first part of where we first meet Bruce Wayne until he goes down to he wants to open up six. Six is good. That's a great line.
Yeah. Well, it's so weird too because he's just like trying to guess. He just like brings Alexander Knox and Vicky Vale in on it because they're there. He doesn't know.
No, yeah, he has no idea how much bottles of champagne or boxes of champagne they should open. He's probably never been around this many people in his life.
Right.
Like, why does he even have this like gambling gala at his like Commissioner Gordon's throwing roulette out? He's playing roulette. It's very strange, but yeah, like that's a great scene with Vicky Vale. Then we see him like he's hanging upside down or whatever he's doing. What do you think he's doing in that scene? Is he sleeping? Is he working out? Or is he, because he's like moving his arms? I've never really understood that scene.
It's weird, yeah, because he seems as Vicky. I think he just like can't sleep, and so he must be working out or something. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes I've seen people be like, "Oh, he's like a bat. He's sleeping upside down like a bat,"
Yeah.
but then he's moving his arms. So I've never, yeah. So I'm like, it's very strange. I've never really heard like a definitive statement on that scene, but it's weird, right? Like you said, it's odd that he's just like, he just was with Vicky Vale and he can't sleep. He's got to do some weird ab workout or something.
Well, and I think the weird thing about that scene now, not to it's a product of his time, but right before that sequence, they're going up the stairs and Vicky Vale notes that she's like drunk. And Bruce is like, I only drink when I'm flying.
Yeah, one drink and I'm flying. Like that's a great that's a great line.
Yeah, and so it's just so he's like sober, but it's just kind of a weird thing.
And then after that, he tells Alfred. He doesn't even say like goodbye. He's like he's like Alfred, get rid of her. Like he's like I'm good. It's funny.
But yeah, I guess out of the pantheon of Bruce Wayne's, it's certainly the one that stands out the most. I feel like it's not that any of the others are like better or worse necessarily. Like Christian Bale's, I feel like is more of once you get past Batman Begins, he's more of a like just trying to be like a good person and like fight crime, and that's like his Bruce Wayne is like, yeah, I'm gonna like, pretend, but
be the symbol to inspire them. But Keaton's Batman is like, I'm just in my car. It's like, so I'll send my car to blow up a building. I won't even be in the car. Like it's always like kind of cool, badass stuff that over time that fans have come to appreciate.
Yeah. Well, even like, that oddness, or he's just kind of aloof and like doesn't really know what's going on as Bruce Wayne, but then meanwhile as Batman, he's like strapping a bomb on someone's chest, and like smiling about it,
Yeah, it's very. I mean, even in Returns, like one of my favorite scenes in Returns is in the beginning where he's just sitting in the library, just brooding, like for just no good reason, and then the light shines on him, he stands up, and then he's Batman. It's just, but he's one of my other favorite scenes. In '89 is when he goes to his parents' murder site or whatever where they were killed at Crime Alley, and then is walking just randomly kind of by City Hall, and that's when the Joker comes out dressed as a mime, which always creeped me out when he threw that feather into the gangster's neck or whatever. Even as a kid, I was like, holy crap, like I should not be watching this. But then Keaton kind of gets a blank stare on his face because he sees Jack Napier. He's like, oh my God, this guy's still alive. Last I saw him, I dropped him in a vat of chemicals. He takes a bullet off the shoulder, but it doesn't even flinch him. Like I've always liked that scene where he kind of locks right into like Batman mode, like right away, but like does nothing pretty much.
Yeah. No, this is a cool one, and that scene actually creeped me out as a kid too. I think because it was just the makeup and the
mime comes like running in right off his and the Joker's lips are different than normal. It's always just bizarre. Like as a kid, I was like, "Holy smoke!"
Hey, hello, Benny. It's your Uncle Bingo. Time to pay the check.
What's that line even mean? Like I don't know, but it's a cool line.
I don't know. I mean, the one that always confused me as a kid that. Is when he sees Vicky Vale and he's like enamored with her and he tells Bob, "I'm of a mind to make some mookie." Like,
He's just making stuff up. Well, as the Joker, you can get away with that.
uh,
I'm just saying, but some of the dumbest stuff like possible.
but I want to move a little bit away from the film because at this time, and this was kind of a thing that was really big that they don't do anymore. Not really. I mean, sometimes you might see it with like Star Wars stuff. Occasionally, Marvel will do it, but the comic book adaptation of this movie was written by Denny O'Neil, who worked off a script of the film, and art by Jerry Ordway. And it was originally released in tandem with the film, and it has some slight differences. Obviously it's based on the script for the film, but there are little things like the money that Joker throws out, for example, in the comic book is clearly shown to be fake. It has Joker's face on it, which calls back to an earlier scene in the museum where, Vicky Vale asks what he wants and he says, "My face in the $1 bill." So it's kind of a fun nod. But, this adaptation was pretty popular and it was re-released, in a deluxe edition in 2019 that coincided with the 30th anniversary of the film. And something people should know, as I kind of mentioned, is these types of adaptations were made in order for fans to experience the movie again, when it's out of theaters, because it took forever for these movies to go to home video. And when they did drop on video, they were super expensive and most people couldn't afford them. It was like a big deal to buy like a Batman VHS, way back when. So the cheaper alternative where you can relive the film as much as you want was to buy one of these kind of adaptations. And this all goes to say, BJ, have you read the adaptation and do you like it?
Of course, millions of times I've read that. I actually have a trade that collects all four of the first four Batman movie, the comic adaptations. And as a kid, I read that. I took that with me, like you said, like it was taking the movie wherever I go. Family trips to Maine or whatever, long drives. That's the comic I'm bringing with me, so I can just relive all four of those movies really. And I've read those adaptations so much where sometimes, like you said, that it was based on the script, so there are changes to it. And one of the changes was Batman at the end throws the cape on Robert Wool's Alexander Knox, and then so he can escape easily. And then Knox takes the cape off and he's like, "Oh, can I make the evening edition or whatever?" Like for the longest time, I always thought that was in the movie because I read it so many times in the comic.
No, no, he doesn't really have a good time at that parade.
No, not in the movie.
Yeah, but yeah, I didn't realize they had it like all four together in one trade.
I bought this years ago after Batman and Robin, but
yeah, because I got them like individually, and it's funny because I could picture their covers because I read them a lot too, for the same reasons, because you can kind of hear the movie and but despite it being essentially the film, would you recommend the adaptation to fans, like just as like a fun, deep, Batman book necessarily?
Yeah, I definitely would because written by Denny O'Neil and art by Jerry Ordway. Those are pretty two iconic names in comics history. So I definitely would recommend it to people.
Yeah, I would too. And like the new edition actually has some nice like sketches and stuff in the back, and it's a little extra going on there that is nice to see and kind of really leans into the history of those type of adaptations.
One of the Batman '89 variant covers was done by Ordway, or it was like art from when he first did this. So I picked that one up so I could like kind of add to my collection there.
Oh, for like the miniseries?
Yeah, it was like a variant cover. It's pretty cool.
Speaking of which, we have a third issue coming out this month, finally, for the second miniseries.
I forget those books come out. When I get them in my pull list, I'm like, oh, this is still happening? Like,
it makes it so hard to review for the site, though, too, because it's like 3-4 months go on in between.
I don't even remember what happened.
Yeah, I got to go back. Yeah. So the last section before we wrap up for this episode. Batman '89 launched a 4-film franchise and it brought Batman back to the forefront of comics. At the time, Batman wasn't super popular. Like, people were reading like Batman comics and stuff, but the popularity was waning a little bit. But now, you look around at any DC stand at a comic shop, a majority of titles at DC Comics are either Batman centric or have Batman in them. So he gets around a lot now. Obviously there have been countless video games, film adaptations and standalone series, and the character kind of has only grown from this film and kind of changed the landscape, like I said, of like superhero films forever. People wanted to be Batman, for all those other franchises they were trying to build post 89. And obviously the character has changed and the movies have changed and styles have changed to adapt with what's been going on more currently. But, that film, and I think the reason why a lot of people celebrate it is because it was this like demarcation point that things kind of changed, forever for the character. He would never go back. Even if there was a bad film that killed the film franchise for like 10 years, he would always come back. And
was there one? Was there a bad Batman film?
I think we talked about it, BJ, a few months ago. But, I should have mentioned the 89 game, but that's fine. We can talk about that another time. We could do a whole video game thing. Did you have any final thoughts or feelings on like the legacy of this film?
Like you said, it's definitely the one that kicked off this comic book movie boom that we have. Even though there's been little downward slopes here and there, like, after Batman and Robin, there wasn't any big comic book movies until X-Men, and then there was another down, and then we had Batman Begins and Dark Knight, Iron Man, and the MCU, and then we're off. But even though we had Superman in 79, those movies were on a big downward slope, and then 89 kicked everything off. And Batmania is like, you hear these stories or, see these news clips back then, like, of just people going absolutely nuts for Batman that hasn't really been reached since. Like every now and then we get a little bit of Batmania. We had some of it during Dark Knight where there was those like online things or like guerrilla marketing and things like that. But we just never kind of reached this again of Batmania. Like I'm kind of jealous that I wasn't a part of it. I was only 2 years old or 1.5 years old. I wish I was a part of that. I probably would have been. I would have been cutting the logo maybe in my head. Who knows? But
eating Batman cereal, wearing a Batman hat and a T-shirt.
Yeah, I would have.
Playing with your Ertl micro machines.
Yeah, the cereal probably tastes like crap, but it's Batman. I want it. I would need it. But it is this. I think that's why this movie still resonates today. That it is this weird little time in history in the late 80s, early 90s where, comic book movies were seen as cool and popular. And then it's downward slope again, where it's like, oh, no, man, you're a nerd if you're, going to see, Spider-Man or whatever, or things like that. But now we're in the MCU and Dark Knight and things like that were totally skyrocketed and took what 89 kind of laid the groundwork for, shot it through the moon. But 89 is this weird, like you said, a demarcation point of comic book movies.
Yeah, and no, I think what you said about it being like I would use the term time capsule because I can't remember what phrasing you used just now, but that, where it's just, culture was really different and really weird. And like, actually for people listening, might be worth your time to just like look up like Batman 89 reactions from like the era and just like see like, how banana.
I remember Kevin Smith, he did like one Fat Man on Batman back then. He was talking about it. Like he was saying like he had like the first night it opened, like he had a job at Domino's or something. Like this was obviously before he became famous, but he's working at Domino's, but they didn't need him. It was like his first day at Domino's or something. So he, like they said, like, oh, does anybody want to leave? And he's like, yeah, I want to leave because he wants to go see Batman. So he like jetted like to a movie theater, and he would talk about like how Batman was everywhere, shirts and merchandise, toys, haircuts, everywhere. It was just all over the place. So I always like hearing him talk about it. He can kind of drone on and on, but he was like a nerd like in that time. So he's kind of like a good reference for it.
Yeah, I have to listen to that because I don't think I've actually heard him talk about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I don't know, crazy. But that's kind of our, retrospective of 89. We, covered a lot of ground there. And like I said, we could go into video games, but maybe we'll do an episode that's like all video games all the time because I feel like that's a little, then we could compare things and kind of do like a history timeline.
Yeah.
For more Batman comic reviews, movie news, and so on and so forth, you can visit us at thebatmanuniverse.net. If you want to chat with us, you can hop on our Discord. There is a link below. You can also write to us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. We'd love to hear from you. Anything you want to say or shoot the breeze with us, feel free, and we will get back to you in some form, whether by responding to comments on air or emailing you directly. If you like these episodes, please subscribe, rate, and share. It always helps. It's always a good way to show your support. And for BJ and myself, thanks for listening.